Hi, everybody. Steve Helping Nature. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about some of these areas on the change grid we didn't get to talk about last time we were doing our deep dive into the Likert layers, we've come to call it. So the Likert layer. Oh, by the way, you know what? I might as well show you some new graphics. I told you I'm putting this all up so that it's will be something that's on the on YouTube, and I had to create all the graphics for the builds to occur. So this is kind of like what it's starting to look like. So when I'm trying to explain to somebody how they got to area 25, I'd say you rated your ability as being very, very low, and you rated the challenge as being moderately high. There you are. And so there's a whole bunch of other things that the animation does. But yeah, I've drawn about 400 variations on this very screen. So nevertheless, what I wanted to do today was just talk about these few remaining ones. And so I might as well leave this graphic up here, and then we can look at other layers if we feel so inclined. So pretty much we've talked about everything all the way around to number 19. So 19, 20, 21. 22 we've already talked about because that's really almost entirely the in-grid danger zone. And we've talked a little bit about 23, 24, and 25, particularly as we talked about someone going from being a, let's see if I can use the right language while I look at the thing, but being a helper, a follower, to being a helper. But a little bit more productive tension as you work your way around. So I thought, let's kind of get these last ones out of the way, and then we will have completed our grand tour around the change grid. So starting off with the ones running down the lower axis. Primarily, well, let's do this. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. What do they all share in common? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 all share something in common.
Well, they all perceive low challenge.
They all perceive low challenge. The only way in which they're different is the level of ability they perceive themselves as having. So it's just interesting to kind of go, well, how might your thoughts change, or the voices inside of your head, your little choir you got going on? How might their content change, the words change, the intensity change as you move from having low ability all the way up to, we'll jump all the way up to high ability? What's
Well, a lot
different?
more experience, a lot more skill, a lot more confidence,
Yep.
but
Yep.
no
A lot
activity.
more tedium.
A lot more tedium. Okay. And tell us where the tedium's coming from. Are you suggesting that there is a
No,
relief?
there's no challenge to do this. I could, like you said, I could do it in my sleep.
Yeah, there's no challenge to do this. I really could do it in my sleep. And so this is where that whole apathy is coming into play. Well, I've got several little Kodak moments I could stop at on my way to, those specific characteristics. But what I think you're absolutely correct about is that as my level of ability increases, while my mastery of the activity increases, my interest in performing the activity is likely to wane unless it is demanding my attention. So remember, you can be down in apathy about all sorts of things, but if you're down in apathy about a task that's extremely important, one way or another, you're going to get around to doing it sooner or later. It's not going to disappear. Tim just chatted over unconscious competence. That's what 18 is really all about. Well, that's something that develops. It's all based on the perceived level of ability that we have mastered. Now, so when I go, all right, in pretty much all of these cases, we're going to have the presence of one primary level of tension. That's not really true. As we move from 2020, from 22 to 18, one level of tension in particular is going to grow dramatically. What level of tension are we expecting to encounter in an ever increasing amount as we move down grid?
Apathy.
Apathy. So I'll switch to that layer just to see if it's Yeah. So you see, like, okay, here, when you're very much at the in-grid most one, I think that was number 22, everything's balanced. It's a small world, but all five levels of tension are there, and they look just like a gigantic change grid would look as far as proportions and that goes. Well, as I start to just move up in ability in the shortest, slightest amount of way, well, what peace I had in power, power stress, and stress is now greatly diminished or gone altogether. So now there I am with only a moderately low level of perceived ability. And already I'm down in probably power apathy or apathy, as the case may be. Right. Now, again, when we're using this 5x5, we talk about everything, every spot inside of this square as though it's the same thing. But we know that what we've done is reduced a change grid reading from 169 possible locations to merely 25 possible locations. So, you got to give something up if you're going to chop your information down by what fraction would that even be? By, 3/4, more than that, 5/8? I don't know. I'd have to really look at that. Anyway, as we start moving up in our perceived ability, we end up moving into a slice of the pie where it's almost entirely apathy. Get to moderately high ability, we're completely in apathy, and very high ability. High ability is as deep in apathy as you can get. So, in fact, even if perceived challenge went up a little bit, you'd still be in apathy. And so, um, I think this is an interesting thing to kind of ponder because, as you've heard me say on many occasions before, um, in the world of managing a base of employees, stress gets a lot of attention and apathy gets ignored. And so, as people put more and more of their attention into dealing with stress, and they spend less and less attention on the things that are moving towards apathy, what ends up happening? I mean, when we're allowing our greatest resource to slip down because we've been distracted by something that's further upgrade. So because these things are being ignored, they're going to feed upon themselves, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And by the way, along this path of it getting worse and worse and worse, we think we're achieving mastery. And I suppose we are, but anyone want to celebrate? It just doesn't feel like cause for a party right there. So that's what's going on. Now, if I switch to the layer that talks about the roles, before I do that, I'll ask you, got anyone have any questions, thoughts around?
Yeah, T, I was listening as you were speaking about a lot of attention in the corporate environment going towards stress. I was having a conversation with Tim, and we were talking about quiet quitting,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
the extension of the Great Resignation, which a lot of people are in apathy, and a lot of attention is being given for that particular area. Or let me ask you, would you agree that quiet quitting is an apathy and less of being high in stress?
I would say that there's quiet quitting that is a very deliberate choice on behalf of the employee. I also believe there's a lot of just what I must say, kind of organic quiet quitting. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm most concerned about. So let's say that I'm one of these employees. I've been working at home for the past 2 years. I do my job. I do my job very, very well. Whatever everyone asks me to do, I get done. But I'm not volunteering myself to be putting in more hours. I'm not really trying to grow in my career path there or anything. So in a way, I've kind of quietly quit. But I'm still doing the work because, hey, it pays the bills. Well,
T, is that
yeah.
is that more of an in-grid behavior than a down-grid behavior?
No, I think only the downgrade people can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all
Right.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they really have to have a high level of competence to
Mm-hmm.
successfully remain that far under the radar for that long. Now, I believe that there are some people who just accidentally ended up there. And in fact, I believe they're the majority of people that are quietly quitting, don't even realize that they're quietly quitting. But I think there are also a group of people that are up in power, very calculated, very clever, maybe even some analytical drivers that are saying, exactly what do I need to do to end up ignored? So what's as little as I can possibly say or do that's going to keep me off of their radar? In which case, I think they're making a very calculated, intentional act of quiet quitting. Thoughts about that?
You know, T, my client in New York did two things that I think have addressed this. They put in a flex time policy, and now they're looking at a 4-day work week.
All
So
right.
they've engaged their workforce in positive ways to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, right. Because, bottom line for the corporation, I don't really care when the work gets done. I just care the work gets done. And so if you can get it done in 4 days, then feel free, get it done in 4 days. And if you can get it done in a few hours, fine, get it done in a few hours. So instead of thinking of being compensated, well, it's just like us. Sometimes we're billing by the hour, but sometimes we're all billing by the project. And if we're billing by the project, how many hours do we all want it to take?
As few as
As
possible.
few as possible. And so I don't see how it's any different in the world of how corporations work with employees. I mean, employee, outside contractor, aren't we just talking about different ways of getting paid? So, yeah, I think their behaviors are going to parallel whatever our behaviors might be in that same situation. But anyway, I'm very curious. The people who are deliberately doing it are going to plot where they are more engaged in doing it. They have stronger intention, etc. Where if they're down here, their engagement is now downgrade awareness, maybe some downgrade intention, maybe someday somebody should do blah, blah, blah. That to me is a very different energy that leads to quiet quitting versus the energy of someone doing it as a strategic career move. I mentioned last time around that a lot of the people who have deliberately quietly quit have actually taken on another position, full or part-time, with other companies in their industry. Suddenly they've become a freelancer, and it just so happens that their contingency fee, or what do we, yeah, their contingency fee is all based on whatever their salary was. So that's basically what they're saying. It's kind of like, oh no, I get the work done they want me to get done, and lo and behold, they're paying me X amount for it. So yay. Yeah.
So
Anyway,
I think it's interesting too from a company perspective. What does that say about your engagement that you can have a part of your population holding down two virtual jobs and not being really questioned by either one of them?
yeah, well, I think we would want to go and talk to David and say, David, do we need fewer FTEs? What are we doing on the employment side of things? So,
Right.
Yeah.
if they can get the job done in far less time, well, then that's not the best business decision for me to make. Well, I'm sure there's exceptions, but generally speaking, I would say that's not the best business decision someone could make. And obviously, the exception is that there are plenty of times when people turn to outside sources, knowing fully well that they're going to be paying a very high premium for an outsider to do work that perhaps, if we were an insider, we could have done for whatever our salary happened to be. So, yeah. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, so that's the thing I wanted to first bring to your attention is that these all share an ever increasing contribution of apathy or a result of apathy, and it starts really early. Similarly, when we start talking about the ones that are going up the axis, so 22 here, it is at the in-grid, so but you're just going up, it becomes increasingly more and more stressful, and it starts happening rather quickly, and it gets rather profound even halfway up. So there's most definitely something that's going on there. Now combine that with the intensities that we talk about, and obviously we're saying, well, what this person is experiencing may be apathy, ever increasing contribution of apathy there, but the intensity is what's really changing. So I can start feeling apathy down here. I mean, how many of you ever had a job that was really, really easy and you were good enough at it, but you didn't care to really put any time or energy into getting any better at it? Anybody want to admit to that?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, did you ever have a paper route? I mean, so unless you decided
Gas station filling cars.
exactly something just that's very, what do I want to say, task oriented, and we're trading time for dollars. It's very transactional kind of stuff. Well, I could easily take a job down here. So So
Our waitress yesterday.
well, I don't know because see, I was thinking now our waitress certainly did not seem to be in apathy. So, and it's the same thing. It's kind of like, I wonder if it's because she wants to keep it more interesting for her own benefit because she's there for 6 hours a day or whatever it ends up being. So are we just allowing ourselves to end up moving down grid, or are we doing it deliberately? And if we notice that we're moving ourselves down grid, what kinds of things might we self-apply in order to manage our own level of tension to get us out of apathy? And so, to Linda's point, if you're a wait staff person, you stop looking at it as just the perfunctory tasks being performed and said, well, what I'm really in the business of doing is creating generous tips for myself. So how can I go about doing that? How can I be as efficient as I can be? How can I be as personable? How can I not get in people's way? All those qualities we're all looking for in a good service professional. So to me, they're keeping themselves out of apathy. Maybe if they're well managed, the manager is helping them to aspire to some higher level. The little example I was originally thinking about, though, was having a paper route. Now, I've never had a paper route, so everything I know about paper routes I got from watching TV, mostly Leave It to Beaver. But I can tell you that maybe, just maybe, the people who are taking their paper route seriously want to be able to do the route as quickly as possible with as few complaints as possible. So develop that remarkable arm that allows them to throw from the sidewalk up onto the porch, not too close to the door, but just close enough that people can see. You get the idea? Anyone who wants to do that and wants to turn it into a game, if for no other reason than to make it either more interesting for them or end up increasing their profits because it streamlines whatever the outcome is. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, Leave It to Beaver.
When we got our papers for the paper route, they came in a big stack.
Yep.
You had to cut the stack and then fold all the papers into each other and put them in a bag so you could throw them.
That's right. And so
then you would be off on your bike going as fast as you could.
yeah, because you had to get really good at folding that paper, because if you didn't fold it right and you went to throw it, what happened to it?
Yeah, the Sunday papers were always the hardest.
Yeah, with all the inserts and
Yep.
all that stuff. Yeah, yep. I mean, good luck rolling that. You probably had to rubber band it if you were going to throw it.
Yep.
Anyway, but that's my whole point. So there's always going to be a group of people, I believe, that their response is going to be ever increasing apathy, and they feel in no way compelled to do anything to change that of their own volition. But there's also going to be people who are going to start feeling as though this thing is starting to move too far down grid, and before it even gets the chance to get down there, they want to turn it into something more interesting, more engaging, more profitable. They want to grow and gain and all those kinds of qualities that most corporate leaders are saying they would like to see in their employees. So yeah, so I kind of go like, well, look, though, what if I'm just one of these people who I'm supposed to have a job because I want the job to be on my on my application form for college. So I've got to show that I've done something. Well, what can I do that is as little as possible and get better at it? So that's it. Now I get a little bit better at it because I've been doing it longer. My feelings of apathy are just that much more intense now. And my ability gets even higher. Maybe they start giving me a little bit of responsibility, but my apathy is now full blown in this area. So I can certainly see, particularly how people who work long term in a predictable retail setting or a predictable food service, predictable factory.
Manufacturing.
What's that?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing, exactly. It's just so monotonous that over a period of time, I'm going to stick with it because it's easy for me to do, and you're probably well compensated. So, but you're down in apathy, down in apathy. Yeah. All right. So, can you guys kind of feel that there's these nuances that you're going to go through as you move through these squares? Yep.
Yep.
All right, I want to show you one more layer, and then we'll talk about the ones that are upgrid. Danger zone. Oh, by the way, since we're on the danger zone thing, see what I mean when I'm talking about these four areas that are way at the extremes? They're almost entirely in a danger zone. So there's not much else we need to add. There's plenty there to talk about if we're reading someone's grid and focusing on only these the 5x5 array. Nevertheless, there it is. Yep. Oh, that's just a lot of words. Okay, but here's what I thought was interesting. What may very well be happening as I'm moving from very far in grid to very far down grid, my ability is increasing. I may have started out as a simple follower, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then I, instead of being someone who needed to be told what to do it, I was able to take a little bit of initiative because I knew what they were going to tell me to do. So I might as well go ahead and do it. So my ability is increasing a little bit. And maybe if I do that effectively enough, they kind of are, my head moves into sort of like an administrative position. Now I'm starting to at least self-manage whatever the task is, or maybe I can now do a few other sorts of things as well. So I can kind of run the day-to-day sort of stuff, the administrative side of things. As I move further and further downward, my ability goes up. I may very well now start to become more of a thinker and start noticing the sorts of things that are working well, not working well, maybe even a few ways to improve things, but it's all happening in my mind. It's all happening in a state of apathy. I'd have to move up grid before any suggestion might even be forthcoming. So can you guys feel the difference between someone who comes up with the solutions to the world's problems, but never actually articulates it? You know, there are plenty of people out there who think they've got all the answers. Well, that's what's happening this far down grid. And they may very well have some good answers, but they're not doing anything with them. Yes, go right ahead. Anybody? Oh, I thought I saw someone on mute for a second. All right, anyway, so that's how people would move down grid. Questions, comments about that one? Nay. Then we can kind of look at the ones that are running from in-grid to up-grid. And the same thing is going to happen, but again, it's an ever-increasing amount of stress is coming into their reality. So the person who is very far in grid certainly has an element of stress because, again, if you're that far in grid, you still have all of the levels of tension available to you in all of their regular proportions. So you got a little bit of power of stress going on, but you've also got power stress and power. You know, you're just all of them all at once. It's just a very little world, just a very little world. And certainly how things are different here is a matter of the intensity. So if you're way out grid here, or scratch in grid here, well, that's very low intensity. I might even want to come in and add a zero for the intensity, but you can get the idea. This is just not a whole lot of much of anything really happening. But as I go up grid, the intensity of that reaction is getting higher and higher. And again, only have to get up to moderate challenge before look where my level of stress is or how much stress is taking over that. It's almost entirely stress. Then the last two, full blown stress as the challenge hits moderately high or high. And so is it becoming more intense? Absolutely. I mean, there is a difference in intensity between this little piece right here, which would be block 25, and this one furthest upgrade, which I think is block number 10. So you guys should be able to feel the difference between being in an upgrade danger zone and just being darn close to one. So, yep, thoughts about that? No? All right. So if we get to our no, that's one that
Question.
yes, please. Yes, go ahead and unmute. Oh, all right. I think you're muted. Anyway,
Challenge of being totally out of control
okay.
and very little ability now, although you used to have it because you're feeling totally out of control.
Uh-huh.
But you're not exhibiting the expression of extreme stress.
Because how high do you think the challenge is, really?
An 11.
Well, if you're up to an 11, then you're in the upgrade danger zone.
Yep.
So I don't know how you could be in that set of perceptions and not feel some degree of panic, some drive to self-preserve, get out of the situation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But
But if
I
you
just
just
want to
come
ask the
down to,
question.
yeah, if you just come down to 9 instead of 11 for challenge, if it was a 9, now the person would certainly be energized, but not in the danger zone.
Yeah,
So they might be highly alert to what's going on, um, because they perceive themselves as having, as you said, a lower level of perceived ability at that point in time. But they, and by the way, the ratio is still crippling. They have a perceived challenge of 9 and a perceived ability of 1. That's 9 times the challenge of the
right.
ability. So they're still totally out of whack. But at least they're not up in this reactive upgrade danger zone where they're scrambling for something to do. So
I
anyway,
see.
this bodes better. Yep.
So that's why, okay, okay, good. I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah. And then I think too, if you look at the energies we're looking at, they're very high up into the energizer area, but they were just in the helper area. So what's happening between that helper role and that energizer role? I think the helper role is a little bit more hands-on, and the energizer is a little bit more about impacting the energy levels of those around them, or noticing levels of energy that's happening all around them. So this is a little bit different
I see.
focus, and yeah,
Hey T,
yeah.
and doesn't the engagement layer help illustrate that response as well? Because I'm thinking that at that higher perceived challenge, the level of awareness has increased. So
Oh
either
yeah,
cognitively or in my behavior, I am aware now much more of that stress that I'm experiencing.
yep. Well, I think you're right, because if you look, both of these, number 25 and number 10, both of these more upgraded in-grid responses are almost entirely in stress. They're also almost entirely in hyper awareness. That should certainly go together. But hyper awareness, when you're way in the upgrade danger zone, is like an inescapable, in your face, immediate threat. Where if I'm here, I'm kind of like, when you see an animal go on high alert. So suddenly they're as focused as they can get. They don't feel threatened yet in the moment, but they are definitely assessing the degree to which the threat is present. So that is what I think is happening up here. The challenge is certainly high, but not as high as it could be. But their ability is still quite low, so they're being triggered to really pay attention. So hyper aware, absolutely, just not as intense as it was if we'd be up here. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So that's what I wanted to do, is just kind of walk our way through this, and you guys could see what's happening in each of the different areas of the change grid. And that finishes our little go around of this. So I will kind of ask you guys to think about when you are reading a change grid, and if the only change grid you're reading is your own, this still holds true. When you're reading a change grid, have you fallen into the pattern of sharing just a few little tidbit insights that you happen to remember from your training, or happen to find really works with the kinds of clients you're working with and the kind of work you're trying to do with them? All right, are you presenting a mere fraction of what there is to present, or what? And so my goal, by working our way around these different areas, was to just exercise for you the grand diversity of things that you could share, based on some of the more intermediate places someone can plot on the change grid. So it isn't just 5 levels of tension, and it isn't just, there's, every one of these spots is different, and they each have their own merits to that. So was that a good review for everyone?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, yes, yes,
Perfect,
yes.
perfect, perfect.
Yeah,
So
even
then
with
let
my
me Thank you. Thank you. So then let me remind you all that as of next week, Tuesday, we'd like to start looking at the Enneagram, and look a little bit into what it's trying to do. What is the purpose behind it? What's the real why would someone use an Enneagram rather than something else. So what's its unique kind of niche and placement? And then let's figure out, does it overlay on the change grid? And if so, how? And how can it help us? And how can we help it? So that's where we're going to start on Tuesday. We are going to send out a broadcast to our general list again. We would like to see the participation of the Circle of Brilliance continue to increase. And so we really would like each one of you to reach one and invite someone to come along. So when you get the email from us, do feel free to broadcast it to anyone you think might be a good contribution to the Circle's discussions. So with that, thank you all very much. Questions, comments before we're done?
Hey, real quick, T, and I can't remember if it was Bars on a previous call had asked about the identification of the pre-aware state, that extremely in-grid state or plotting. Can you revisit your explanation and your thoughts around that?
What pre-aware is really all about?
Well, prior to pre-aware. So
prior to pre-aware, yeah, I would put the word oblivious is what's really going on here. At this very far into things, I truly believe that at the conscious level, they have no awareness that they're even unaware. So they don't know what they don't know. They don't know. They're just plain oblivious. So now that's not necessarily a bad thing. I promise you that each and every one of us is totally oblivious to 99.999% of all the things that are happening on this planet at this very moment, right? Right? That's the way that it is. It wouldn't even be practical for us to be aware of everything. And so I kind of wonder if our brain, our spirit, whatever you want to say, is in charge of the whole thing. Are they keeping us oblivious for a reason? So that we can stay focused on the things that are actually happening, are actually impacting what's really going on in our lives. You know, so that's what I think about what's going on here. This is a place on the change grid where you do not know that you do not know what you do not know. So unconscious incompetence is at its highest expression here. So to me, incompetence, if we're not careful, sounds like a value judgment or an assessment we're making of the person, instead of just saying to be incompetent is to simply not have the competency. Well, why would I have a competency over something I don't even know exists? I mean, maybe it's accidental, but I don't think that's really happening. So maybe what it is that we don't really start to engage with life until we're out of that square. We have to be aware. We have to interact. Or what's the point of being a conscious human being? Why aren't we just fully instinctual? So that's a very long answer. But Tim, that's my whole little point there, is that this is a state of being oblivious.
I would agree with that. And that's what I was thinking, was the don't know what I don't know explanation. And I think, for me, I think that's why it would fall into a danger zone, because you could wind up behaving in a way that creates problems in the environment, in your relationships.
That's right.
But you were unconscious of that. And then as we move into the pre-aware, because I was reading something the other day that said it takes the brain about 4 to 5 seconds to process new data.
Oh, okay.
And so, it's probably at that point in which we are. But once that data begins to get processed, I think that perhaps is when it begins to move into that pre-aware state.
Well, right. And so, because again, we think some of that processing occurs before our brains make us consciously aware.
Right.
Again, it's bringing stuff to our attention.
Right.
Yeah. And there's always going to be a little bit of a gap. I think that this is the other thing here, is to say that when we say, you don't know what you don't know, I would like to expand that to say that in the realm of the things I don't know, there are things that I have no reason to know, and there are things that I really could have benefited from knowing a little bit earlier. You know what I'm saying there? It's kind of like sometimes this obliviousness is very useful to us, and sometimes it has a dark side. Let's see, Shags just wrote,
Yeah,
do
I'd
you
like to
know
share.
why we don't know what we don't know? I don't know, Shags.
Because we don't know what we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. How would I
And I
know?
heard somebody say we don't know what we don't know
I
because
don't
we
know
don't
what
know
we
what
don't
we
know.
don't know.
Right.
And it's just you just pattern this around on the
Yeah,
same thing.
but again, I always like people to remember none
Yeah.
of us know more than a teeny tiny itsy bitsy fraction of all the stuff that is probably out there for us to know. I mean, I think I gotta believe that if we didn't have a brain that performed this filtering process, that didn't intentionally keep us um, out of conscious awareness of a lot of things until the right time. Well, good grief, what would life be like if we were all simultaneously aware of absolutely everything that's going on at all levels all around us? I mean, I don't want that reality. Ignorance is bliss.
But sometimes it's experiences that may be painful or not that begin to raise our consciousness around those things that we are just simply not aware of.
Absolutely. And that might be the fact that because it was something that happened to us or that we witnessed happening to others, that's what's pulled something that others may not pay any attention to at all into our awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's how we then move up again. I'm feeling very upgrade right now. So I want to go there and say, I want to help. I want to get all going. I want to be that energizer. We got to get the message out there, build the troops. There's hardly any real expertise required to just get out there and, uh, you know, announce an issue or announce a message. I mean, we've got a lot of people that will go out there, preaching on the street corners, if you will, that may or may not have really investigated what they're out there promoting. So, yep. Um, I think the other thing is that, and I sent a little note to Diane Bufflin about this. So I said, if we look at the diagnoses from the whole mental health kind of thing, it's called a DSM. I don't know what number it's up to by now, but DSM. Um, they would say that if you're very, very far upgrade, this is the domain of anxiety. So you're anxious. That's your disorder, an anxiety disorder. If you are too far downgrid, this is depression, so a depressive disorder. If you're very far outgrid, this is narcissism. And so this is the home of narcissistic disorder. What is the opposite of narcissism? So think about that for a second. It's got to be that we need to have an opposite. So what's the opposite of narcissism?
A martyr.
A martyr? Hmm.
Focus
Are
is
they
on
outwardly a
who they
martyr
are.
or is it just an internal experience? What do you think there?
I hadn't thought about it.
I know, exactly. Me neither. I don't know what I don't know. Okay, so
Yeah, could
but
be.
And I think one of the things that narcissistic people do is become martyrs, but they're still outgrid.
yeah, they do play a little bit of the oh woe is me. Um, all right, so here's the name of what's opposite narcissism. You guys will find this fun. It's called egoism. So egoism, the other side of narcissism, the fairly recently coined term egoism comes from the Greek myth of Echo and Narcissus, which is also where we get the term narcissism. So that's Narcissus's outbreak. Cursed by the goddess Hera, the nymph Echo can no longer speak for herself, only repeat the last words of what others say to her. She begins to lose her sense of self along with her voice, so she hides deep in her forest until a beautiful young man enters the forest and asks, "Is anyone here?" Excitedly, she calls back, "Here," and runs out to meet him. In losing her ability to interact and share her thoughts, however, Echo herself starts to fade. Narcissus rejects her and leaves her to the forest, where her remaining identity and life force continue to trickle away. Isn't that interesting? So that's what's happening very, very far in grid. This individual's world is very small. The outgrid people tend to be the perpetrators. The in-grids are the perfect victims. just waiting for whatever. So very low self-esteem, all that sort of stuff. And again, we don't often encounter these people. Doesn't mean they don't exist. They are probably out there in great proportion, but they don't call any attention to themselves. They don't reach out. So egoism lies at the far end of the narcissism spectrum. In the middle, you'll find people with what experts consider healthy levels of narcissism. That's right, narcissism isn't always the evil force it's made out to be. On the other end, you'll find people who meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. So I thought that was interesting. But that's also what's happening in here. Maybe the reason why they're pre-aware is because they have just little by little either developed within themselves a separation. We'll talk about marginalization. They're totally outside or whatever, or people have pushed them into that position through how they were raised, talked to, socialized, whatever. So are we going to beat people into submission? That's what's happening in grid. Or are there just people that are naturally submissive and okay with that? But yeah, that's part of what's going on. All right, thoughts about anything else before we're done for today? Okay then, all right, so next Tuesday, we'll start our discussions on the Enneagram model. In the meantime, if you got anything you want to chat about, feel free to reach out to me. So thanks everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.